I'm Sarah Goldvine, and this is Let's Talk Housing, a podcast by BC Housing. In this space, we explore the complex systemic issues that make it challenging for many people in British Columbia to access and afford a home. The provincial government has an ambitious plan with the largest investment in housing affordability in BC's history. Tasked with helping deliver on this plan is BC Housing, which is working with hundreds of partners to develop, manage, and administer a wide range of affordable housing and homelessness services in hundreds of communities across the province. In this podcast, you'll hear from those delivering innovative and exciting affordable housing solutions. As the effects of climate change become more pronounced, people living in low-income housing, those experiencing homelessness, and other marginalized groups are at greatest risk from extreme weather events. Today on Let's Talk Housing, we'll be taking a closer look at the ways in which development and design can encourage long-term sustainability in housing. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we're recording today's podcast from the ancestral homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We offer our respect to their peoples, past and present. Also, in full transparency, this episode is being recorded in July 2022, so reflects the issues and challenges of that time. BC Housing and our partners are looking at innovative ways to design housing that keeps people comfortable and safe, even as climate shifts. We're also considering which materials are the most sustainable to build housing, as well as new technology for cooling and heating sustainably that significantly reduces greenhouse gas emissions. Today, we'll be focusing on a unique new housing project in Vancouver. The project is called Vienna House. It has that name because the research and the lessons learned in its development are being shared with the city of Vienna in Austria for use in similar affordable housing projects there. Joining us today to explain more about this pilot project and what it means for housing innovation is John Wall with Public Architecture and Communication. John is the principal architect on the Vienna House project. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Sarah. Happy to be here.
So, John, I'm sure you've worked on many projects in your time as an architect. Can you tell us a little bit about what makes Vienna House such a unique project from the perspective of design?
What makes the project unique is a great group of people that are involved. We have More Than a Roof, which is will be the operator of the project. And they've really set the tone for the project in terms of livability and sociability and making sure that the project's more than just a building, that it becomes a home for people. The other group is City of Vancouver, and they're setting a very high bar for sustainability. And then we also have researchers from UBC. They're watching what we're doing and recording it, and ultimately we'll be sharing that information with groups like SciUS across multiple platforms. There's a website. So there's the whole ideas about knowledge transfer and getting that information out there. So it's a fascinating project for many reasons, and I could probably spend a couple hours even just talking about that question.
That's fantastic. And it's really interesting to think about the number of partners that are involved. How is having the operator, and so for our listeners, More Than a Roof, it operates affordable housing in Vancouver. How is having them involved right from the beginning? How does that make things different for you when it comes to designing the project?
I think it's really important. I'd say that we often work very closely with operators and users. The name of our firm is Public, and we do a lot of work with public institutions. And so we're often working closely with user groups. We've developed a design process that's very collaborative, and we're always looking for their take on where the design should go. So it's not really a top-down process. It's a very lateral process where we're bringing a lot of ideas, and then we're trying to synthesize the best design solution that meets all the different criteria.
Now, one thing that's really unique about Vienna House is that it's aiming to achieve the lowest possible carbon emissions while also keeping the building affordable. So a lot of green building technology has required significant capital investment at the front end. It's expensive. And that makes the housing more expensive as well. And at the same time, we know that people who are most at risk from climate impacts are those who are marginalized or don't have access to wealth. So, how are you making that work, John? How are you actually using this project to advance green technology, including through Passive House, while also keeping the housing affordable?
Well, I think the main philosophy is what's old is new. So we're starting with time-tested solutions. You travel to hot countries around the world, and what do they use for housing? They use courtyard typologies. So, the main idea is to use a courtyard and use passive ventilation, and then augment that with some mechanical ventilation. So we call it a kind of a dual mode system. So you're getting the best of traditional passive ventilation strategies, cross ventilation through units. So the great thing about the courtyard is that every unit gets a window on opposite sides of the, one on the street, one on the courtyard side. So you can open up both windows and get a breeze right through your home. The other thing we're doing is providing exterior shades. So, you go to cities like Barcelona and they've got all sorts of exterior shades. So in the heat of the day, you close those windows and you cut the sun out and you cut out that solar heat gain. But, we also know that on certain days or certain times of the year, we can get forest fires where you get the air quality is really bad. And, you don't want to rely on that passive ventilation. So we also have the ability, or residents will have the ability to close the windows, close the shades, and rely on passive cooling through the ventilation system. So, sorry, not passive cooling, but mechanical ventilation through the heat recovery system.
So passive technology would be if I open the windows on two sides of my house and the wind flows through, and mechanical would be fans or air conditioning or other forms of machines that require electricity.
That's right. And so by using the passive strategy, it means that you can downsize that air conditioning plant. So instead of it being in a conventional building, it might be 2 or 3 times the size and they're 2 or 3 times the price. So one way of reducing cost is just only building what you need, and building a more efficient cooling plant means that, less capital cost, less operational cost, and still the same level of comfort. Our mechanical consultants have modeled thermal comfort. So they've studied how comfortable each unit will be, in terms of solar gain and orientation and all those things. And they've discovered that even using 2050 climate data, that the building will be comfortable. It'll meet BC Housing's stringent requirements for thermal comfort. And it means that those, at-risk seniors or people with health conditions will be safe in their units.
That's great. Now, this Vienna House is going to be in East Vancouver, and it's right in the middle of a bunch of amenities, transit routes, neighborhood shops. It's within walking distance to stores, and it's right near a local park, Charlotte Lake. In fact, it's so close to transit that you can almost reach out and touch it. So, when you're thinking about this project, can you talk a little bit about how your team is considering livability and how you're reflecting that in the design of Vienna House?
I think, again, it sounds like one solution, but the courtyard also helps us with livability. One of the big issues for the site is the SkyTrain line that you've mentioned. I believe at its closest, it's about 10 meters from the building face. So in a conventional build, you would usually see units just facing that SkyTrain, no opportunity to open windows on any other direction. So you can imagine, and the SkyTrain runs like right to the wee hours of the morning. So you're trying to get some sleep. The SkyTrain's noisy and you can't open your windows. You're relying on mechanical ventilation. So there goes your kind of green strategies. So the courtyard allows us allows residents to shut those windows facing the SkyTrain, open windows into the courtyard, and still get some nighttime cooling. And it also creates a kind of wonderful acoustic oasis. Our acoustic consultants have studied that, and they've confirmed that the courtyard will be about almost 20 decibels quieter than the north side of the building where the SkyTrain is. So that's sort of the difference between the sound of a vacuum cleaner running constantly and a refrigerator's hum. So the courtyard will be the quieter space, and you'll hear a little bit of a buzz, but not the same level of noise from the SkyTrain. And I'm pretty aware of the SkyTrain because I live in East Van, and I can hear the SkyTrain from my bedroom when I open the windows at night, and we're blocks away from it. So it's a real issue, and we want to make sure that people that live in those units have options, and that's what we're trying to do is provide flexibility. People feel more comfortable in their housing if they know that they can change things. You know, you can open a window, you can shut some blinds, you have choice, and we're trying to give residents choice, which makes them feel more, that you have ownership and agency over the space that you live in.
Yeah, that SkyTrain can be very loud, metal on metal. So for listeners that aren't familiar with Vancouver, the SkyTrain it's kind of like a subway, but it goes in the sky. It's an elevated rapid transit, and it very, very important feature in Vancouver. John, we've talked a fair bit about heat. Of course, this is in Vancouver, so we can't ignore the risk of earthquake as well. Can you talk a little bit about the types of features that you're incorporating into Vienna House to consider the potential impact of other extreme events such as earthquakes?
Yeah, so of course the building will be designed to meet all current codes, but where we can kind of go beyond code minimums is to make sure the building is kind of well designed. And simply designed. So one of the basic principles is that we've organized it where the structure is kind of like Lego blocks, where everything stacks up. So units stack up on top of each other. We don't do a lot of transfers of structure. We don't have a lot of cantilevers. We don't have a lot of expressive forms. So it does mean that the building has a more simple massing and appearance, but it means that it's easier to build. And this gets back also to affordability. It's stronger in earthquakes. It's easier to build. It's faster to build. While at the same time, I think we've created a form that's responsive to the site. It's responsive to the community. And we've had very positive feedback on the appearance. So it doesn't look like stacked up modular housing. It still looks like an attractive apartment building with architectural expressions, but it's at its core, it's very regular. So systems are efficient. And this again helps with cost, it helps with passive house, and it helps with strength.
We've been talking about Vienna House. Part of this project as well is something called Vancouver House, which is in Austria. And really part of the unique element of this project is that knowledge sharing between the team that's building Vienna House in Vancouver and the team that's building Vancouver House in Vienna. Can you talk a little bit, John, about the lessons that you hope the teams are able to learn from each other for these two projects?
It's been really a privilege to take part in these workshops with the firms from Austria. And perhaps many of the listeners won't know, but Austria is really the leader in many of these fields. They've been building social housing since World War II, and majority of people, regardless of income, live in affordable housing, and often your rent is geared to your income. So it's kind of a cultural way of life. Like the idea of home ownership is less important there because everyone can live in affordable housing. So it's just a different mindset. So the developers and city planners and architects in Vienna they have a lot of experience doing good social housing. They also are really at the forefront of sustainability and engineered mass timber products. So we're learning a lot from them. I think what they're interested in, and we've chatted to them about this, is our process. They have a very different design process. They tend to be uh, brought on through competitions. So they have less involvement with the user groups, less involvement with the authorities. And so I think they see our process as being more collaborative, more where the stakeholders involved earlier on. So there's that opportunity to really tailor a project specifically to the community that's going to live there. So it's, neither process is right or wrong. It's just there's some benefits. We have some benefits and they have some benefits. So I think it's been a great opportunity to sort of sit down and work together on and share ideas. I think one of the really nice comments from the Viennese architects was that they just enjoyed knowing that architects in other parts of the world are struggling with the same problems. And, just sharing even just the experience and knowing that we all jump through the same hoops and all have the same challenges. And how do you balance sustainability and affordability and buildability and amenities? And how do you get the best project you can on a budget while achieving as close to net zero as you can? So it's just knowing that everyone's struggling with the same problems can be a real benefit.
John, I'm going to squeeze in one more question. So right now, of course, we're recording this in July 2022, and the project Vienna House is still working its way through the development process. But one day, soon, it will be open. When you picture opening day for Vienna House, what do you hope for the residents? What do you think that will look like for them when they move into their new homes?
I think our biggest goal is the intangibles of improved sociability, and this goes again back to more than a roof and to the courtyard typology. One of the main reasons we proceeded with the courtyard is that it also helps with sociability, that people will have the opportunity to get to know their neighbors more, that they'll have more events, that there's the possibilities of combating things like loneliness and social isolation. That, if you are a senior at risk, the most important thing is that you feel comfortable knocking on your neighbor's door and asking for help. And I think that's one of the sad things that we experienced in last year's heat dome, was that many seniors perished and people didn't know they were in distress. So I think our hope for Vienna House is that because of the courtyard, because of some of the amenity spaces we're providing, we're trying to make it a place where people want to get together and they have meetings and have birthday parties and festivals and seasonal events, that people get to know each other, and it helps build trust. And, one of the most important parts of any democracy is that you trust your neighbors. If you don't trust your neighbors, you get the kind of divisions we're seeing south of the border and in Canada. So I think the broader goal is that it actually helps build trust, builds community, which helps enliven our democracy.
Well, it's going to be a really beautiful day when Vienna House opens, and really, really looking forward to having that new housing project open in East Vancouver. John, thank you so much for joining us today and telling us about this exciting project. Let's talk again soon. To learn more about BC Housing or to apply for subsidized housing in British Columbia, visit our website at bchousing.org.